Hey there, Dr. Claw here with a brief screencast walking you through the final exam for monsters in British literature. So this is a pretty straightforward exam. There are two parts. It's worth 70,000 points. You will download this exact document from the final exam assignment located on Canvas and type all of your answers into this document without erasing the questions, please. That's going to make it a lot easier for me to grade it. Make sure you include your name. And the goal of this final is to show that you can recognize important moments with monsters in this text, in these texts, and think about what these monsters reveal in terms of fears that cultures may have, and then showing me that you can conduct an argument using the principles of argumentation that we have practiced throughout the term. Oh, and this says 50 points, so I will fix that. Those are each going to be 3,500 points. Anyway, quick fix there. So you will have an option of 5 passages that you'll complete out of 11, and so as you may guess, there's one passage for each text. So out of the 11 texts, you can choose a passage from any 5 of those texts. And what I've done is I've chosen passages that have a monster or the character's monstrous behavior in the passage, and I ask that you do a few things here in these passages, and it's very important that you actually follow through with the details of this particular section and don't omit some of the small things I'm asking you for. So, identify the text name. This should be easy. I have written all of the text names here. Identify the text author. That should also be pretty easy. If it's anonymous, you'll just write anonymous. Otherwise, the name will be right here. Now, why am I asking you to do these things when I've already typed them out? It's very important when you're making an argument that you know who and what you're talking about. And I know that might sound silly, but it's just helpful to remind yourself, okay, I am talking about the text of Beowulf. This is an anonymous text. Or I'm talking about the text of Beast-Claveret. This was written by a woman in the Middle Ages, Marie de France, and that's kind of unusual. So anyway, I want to make sure that you are keeping in mind who's writing these texts and what the name of the text is. So those are the details that need to be in there. And then you will, the writing portion of this section is you'll write 2 to 4 sentences explaining how the monster or the monster's behavior in the passage reveals a fear. Okay, so some of the passages are longer than others. So you'll see the passage from Beast-Claveret is pretty short. The passage from Beowulf is a little longer, and it's sort of going to depend on the type of text that you're looking at in terms of length. But you can see, for example, I've chosen a passage about Grendel, and it talks about the slaughter that Grendel was enacting on the Danes in Heorot. All right, so you will look at this passage and say, okay, well, here's what I think this passage is showing about fear. This is the type of fear I see revealed by this description of Grendel and Grendel's behavior. And that's great. That's what you want to do. And then you'll also need to quote 1 to 3 words from this passage, not from a different passage, from the actual passage I have typed up in this document. Quote 1 to 3 words from the passage you're looking at and include that in your explanation of how you know this passage revealed that fear. And that's it. That's all you have to do for this section. You'll do that 5 times. Now I will give you a little heads up. The Hereford Mappa Mundi, while it does have written portions, and those are interesting, the actual text is the map itself. And so I really want to challenge you to use the evidence of the map and what you're looking at and what you're seeing might reveal about the culture's fears. So for this text, your evidence, those like 1 to 3 words, would be 1 to 3 specific aspects of the image that you're looking at. So maybe you're like, oh, I want to look at his feet, or I want to look at whatever he's holding in his hand right here. That would be your evidence for the Hereford Mappa Mundi. And that's really it. So I have parenthetical citations for each of these, you'll note these look a little different than what you did because these are in block quote format. So when you're using more than 4 lines of text in a quotation, the formatting of that changes. You no longer use quotation marks unless it's spoken dialogue. And then the parenthetical citations at this point go outside of the period. So that's why these look different to you. And then you'll see in Frankenstein, this has quotation marks because it is spoken by the creature. So it's dialogue. And that's what the quotation marks there indicate. So that's the first half of the final exam. And in the second half of the final exam, you'll have a short essay. And again, I'll fix these points before I upload it to the assignment. So your essay will address one of 2 questions I have down here. The essay should have no more than 1 sentence as an introduction. And then that can be 1 sentence in addition to the claim formula thesis. So each essay, you're only writing 1 essay. Your essay needs a thesis that responds to the prompt and uses the claim formula, topic sentences for all body paragraphs that use the claim formula and that connect your analysis to the thesis. You need 3 body paragraphs minimum. This doesn't mean that I'm secretly expecting more than 3 body paragraphs, but rather in order to receive full credit for the essay, you need a minimum of 3 body paragraphs. You may write more if you feel you need to in order to make your point, though not expecting more. And you need evidence quoted and cited from the primary text. You do not need to include a works cited page because I have an entire works cited page down here that cites all of the text from our course, but you do need to include parenthetical citations within your essay. So quoted and cited from the primary text or text that you are looking at. And you need a conclusion. This conclusion should explain the ramifications of your analysis. What have you revealed to your reader through analyzing the text that you did and through addressing the prompt that you chose? I've got a reminder of the claim formula right here. Either way that you prefer it, whether you want to start with the detail, what the text is doing, and then how that thing affects the reader's understanding of the text, or if you want to start with the big idea, the impact on the reader, and then talk about how the text creates that impact on the reader. Those are there for your reference. Okay, so the 2 prompts are kind of big idea prompts, but we've talked about both of these on Yellowdig. So if you've already looked at those posts on Yellowdig and thought through them, these should look kind of familiar to you. So the first prompt is one that I just posted recently on Yellowdig, which is to choose 2 texts that you've read this term and choose 1 monster from each text. And this should be a literal monster, one that the text depicts as appearing monstrous or non-human in some way. So you're really looking for that like literal non-human monstrous entity in the text, even if their behavior is not necessarily monstrous. Okay. For each monster, answer the following questions. What kind of metaphor is your monster? Does this monster seem to stand for something beyond its literal place in the story? What does it stand for and how do you know? What can you learn from this metaphor? So here we're thinking about what could these monsters stand for? If we're looking at the werewolf in Beast Clevery, what could a werewolf be a metaphor for? Or if we're looking at Victor Frankenstein's creature in Frankenstein, what could that creature be a metaphor for? What could it mean other than just being this character in the text? So I am asking you to do some interpretive work here. Next, you'll compare the 2 monsters that you've looked at, because remember, you're looking at 2 different texts, 1 monster per text. Compare the 2 monsters to determine what you can learn about the differences in the metaphors. Is what seems monstrous and scary to one culture the same as what seems monstrous and scary to the other? So this comparative aspect is something you've already practiced in your comparative paper. And it's a great way to understand a little bit more about the fears that these monsters reveal about the cultures that produce the text. Your second option is about the abject, and this is a concept that has come up several times in the reading guides, and they made a pretty long post about on Yellow Dig. So if you want to, if you're maybe thinking about this prompt, but you're not confident that you understand the concept that well, check the instructional tag on Yellow Dig, and you'll see a more detailed exploration of this concept, because I bet you actually understand this concept in a really kind of gut kind of way. Most of us understand when we see something abject, we're like, oh my God, that's just, ugh, it wigs me out. It's disturbing. So that's often the sign of the abject. Basically, it's a concept suggesting that humans define themselves as separate from animals by creating boundaries between human and animal behavior. We encounter the abject when a human strays into animal behavior. For example, it's not unusual for animals to eat other animals, but it is unusual for humans to eat other humans. And that's why this type of behavior, cannibalism, is so horrific to us. It suggests that a human is engaging in animal behavior and perhaps losing some of his or her humanity in the process. So if during this term you've been really interested in this question of what makes a human and can non-humans be human in some way, this can actually be a really fun prompt for you, because the abject is really pushing at that question of, where is that dividing line between humans and non-humans, and is that line actually as solid as we want to think it is? The truly scary part of the abject is realizing that all humans are capable of animalistic behavior, including cannibalism and killing, which in human terms we would call it murder. But humans don't usually do these things simply because we've agreed not to. So there's nothing inherently preventing humans from eating other humans or murdering other humans. But we don't do that because we have socially agreed not to do that kind of thing, and we've socially agreed that that kind of behavior is morally wrong and abhorrent, but if we're not like biologically incapable of it. So this is again going back to that, like, where is the line between humans and animals, and is it a real line? What's keeping us from behaving like animals, and perhaps what's keeping animals from being counted as human? I know some of y'all have been interested in that this term as well. Okay, so like I said, there's a whole post about this on Yellow Dig if you're interested in this concept and want to kind of look at more examples of it before you continue. So if you are looking at the abject, you will choose 2 texts with monsters that demonstrate this concept of the abject, and this section of the prompt just lays out what you'll do in your essay. So explain how each monster demonstrates the abject. Identify what social norms that monster violates. What does the social norm protect? So, for instance, if we're talking about like cannibalism, to come back to that like classic sense of the abject, what might forbidding cannibalism protect? Well, maybe it protects us from feeling like we're always at risk by being eaten by our neighbors or something. You don't necessarily have to walk around worrying that someone's like, you look like dinner, because that's not accepted social behavior. So think about what it is that the social norm is protecting. Why aren't we allowed to go around murdering each other? Why not? What would happen to our culture if that were allowed? So this is an abstract question, but I think it's one that's actually going to help you really think through what these monsters can teach us about the cultures that produce them. All right, what might be scary about violating that social norm? Compare the 2 monsters to determine what you can learn about the differences in the way they demonstrate the abject. So are they violating the same or similar social norms, or are they different in some way? Do they reveal similar fears? And then this is a question that I had in the first prompt as well. Is what seems monstrous and scary to one culture the same as what seems monstrous and scary to the other? So those are your 2 prompt options for this. You'll choose one, write your essay, follow these bullet points to make sure you've got everything you need in there. And then below the Works Cited page, you'll also find the rubric that I'll use to grade the entire final exam. So there are no surprises. It tells you exactly what I'm looking for. And so I'll use passage 1 for the first passage that you write on in section 1 and so on. And then the essay rubric is here. So I do expect you to respond to the prompt, use the claim formula, use topic sentences that have the claim formula beginning each body